In this video, we're going to show you how to install knock sensors on your Jeep Grand Cherokee located underneath your oil cooler. To access your battery, you want to go and open up the back passenger door, slide the passenger front seat forward, and access this panel right here. Put your hands underneath this little flap and lift up. On the front side of this panel is going to be two more clips further up. So slide your hand up underneath and pop those up. Go ahead and remove that panel and set it aside. I'm going to use a 10mm socket to loosen the ground terminal here. Go ahead and wiggle that terminal free. Going to grab your upper engine cover. Just gently pry upward on this. We're just lodging the cover from the plastic push pins in various positions on top of the engine. Set the cover aside. We're going to use our flathead screwdriver, loosen our clamp here on our air intake tube. Over here by the throttle body, we have our air intake temp sensor. We're going to use our small pocket screwdriver, and you want to push in on this little tab right here and pull the connector off. Sometimes you can use your finger on there. Ours is stuck a little bit. Pop that off. And then right behind it, we have our hose clamp here for our intake tube. We're going to use our 5/16 socket. Loosen and remove that. If you have a stubby flathead screwdriver, you can use that as well. We're going to go ahead and remove our intake tube here. Now underneath, this is supported by plastic push pins like this here going into a rubber grommet. So we're going to gently lift up, popping that out. Then we can remove our hose ends and set this aside. Now we're going to go ahead and remove our wiper cowl. That's going to give us better access to the hardware along the back of the engine. Remove the hood to cowl seal. We're going to use our trim tool. Pop up on the little retainer button here. Pull this up. Follow it over to the passenger side and do the same over there. Remove this cover. Unscrew this here. There's a little tab down in here that we need to pry this off of. Pop that off. We're going to repeat this process for the driver's side. Want to remove our wiper blades and arms here. Want to pop up on this cap. We're going to use a small pocket screwdriver. So pop this cover up, and underneath we have a 5/8 nut. Loosen and remove that. Before we remove our wiper arm, if you want to, you can go ahead and identify the placement of the wiper blades by using a piece of masking tape and just run it across the bottom of the wiper blade to leave a mark. We have a nice dirt line right there, so that's going to leave a mark for us to go ahead and know where we can rest our wiper blades. So just fold this up, give it a little wiggle, and pop this off of the wiper transmission. I'm going to throw the nut back on here for now. Now right on the back side here, there's a little tab or button. You can normally get your screwdriver underneath there and pop that up. Just going to throw the nut back on there for now. Now our upper wiper cowl comes across and comes up the top of the fender. There's a couple clips in here that you can use your trim tool and just be gentle. You won't mark up the fender or chip your paint. There's just little clips in here that you need to undo. Here we go. These clips, what we're doing is when we reach down inside, there's a center of these here that we're pushing down on to release the locking tab on the inside there. There it is. So there's the 3 of them there. We're going to do the same for the other side. Here it is. We'll get all 3 of those out there. Gently lift up on the cover. Do the same on the driver's side, and then we can work this cover off. Now, our wiper transmission itself has 2 10mm bolts holding it. There's one over here on the driver's side, another one in the center over there. Let's go ahead and loosen and remove these. That is now completely loose. It is a capture bolt, so that means it'll stay in place while we remove the transmission. This one here, we're just going to pop that one out. Now in the center over here, there's a rubber grommet that goes through a bracket, so we can just take the transmission, slide it towards the driver's side, up and out. You can see the rubber grommet right here. Now before we completely remove this, we need to disconnect the electrical connector from the motor. Press in on this little tab, grab that connector and just wiggle that free, and then set the wiper transmission aside. In the center section right here, we have 4 10mm bolts to remove this bracket right here. 2 here, 2 on the cowl. On the passenger side, right behind the strut tower here, there's another 10mm bolt. Now behind your passenger side valve cover, if you follow this straight back behind your transmission dipstick here, there's another nut in the back over here. Right behind your strut tower and to the right of your AC lines, there's another 10mm bolt. We use a short extension. Grab that bolt, pull that out. Using our extension and swivel socket, we're going to go ahead and get to this upper back bolt. Pull that out. On the back side of our cowl here, we have our wiper harness. I'm just going to use our trim tool and go ahead and pop that off of there. Now we can go ahead and maneuver this, twist that up and out, and set it aside. Before we pull any of our components here, we want to go ahead and cover our throttle body. And you can use a vacuum if you want. We're going to use our air hose and clean off any debris around the top of the engine so we don't drop anything down inside. We now want to separate our harness from our throttle body. Now there's a little red lock tab right here. I'm going to use my pocket screwdriver and just come around the back side here and push that red lock tab out. Push down on the tab on the front and wiggle this off. Slide this off. And then disconnect the little clip here. I'm going to come around to the map sensor on the back side, pinch down on this tab, pull that connector off and just swing that harness off. Tuck that off on the side there. We're going to twist our map sensor towards the back and pull up on it. Just a rubber O-ring sealing that up. Go ahead and set that aside. There's a vacuum hose on the back side here. I want to go ahead and twist that off, and ours is stuck a little bit, so we're going to use a pair of hose pliers. I'm going to gently grab this here and just twist it. Finesse that a little bit. We don't want to crack the intake, but now that we have that loose, we're going to twist it and pull that off. On the back, there's a vacuum hose here with a little clip. Undo that clip, separating the other hose. Using our trim tool, we're going to release this harness. There's a little clip on the back securing this to a bracket right on the back here. We want to get this harness out of the way. Pop that off. Here we go. On the back side here, we're going to use a pair of pliers. I want to pinch this hose clamp here. Open that up, slide that back. I want to remove this hose off the back side of the intake using a pair of hose pliers. Go ahead and grab that and we'll loosen that. And wiggle that off. Back side of the throttle body is a vacuum port. Grab this hose here. Give that a little twist to break that free. And lift that up and off. On the back passenger side here, we have a 10mm nut. I want to go ahead and loosen and remove that. So once you get the nut off of this stud right here, on the back side, there's another stud. There's supposed to be a nut here, but someone was already in here before. There's another nut you want to go ahead and remove off of that. Now there's a bracket right here that goes down to the back side. There's a 13mm nut at the base on a stud. It's hard to see, so I'm just going to put my hand back there with a socket and a ratchet. We're going to loosen and remove that nut and remove this bracket. The whole stud came out, and grab that bracket. On the driver's side here, we have two brackets on the intake manifold, and there are two 10mm nuts. We're just going to use our gear wrench, loosen those, and remove these. Set those aside. Pop our vent tube off. And right here on the side of our air box, I'm going to pull off this here and just kind of tuck this over. We can now take this, swing this out of the way. Using a 5/16 socket, go ahead and loosen the upper intake bolts. With all of these removed, I'm going to grab our intake, pull it up, and remove it. Now that we have the upper intake off, you want to take some towels and put them in the intake ports here. You want to prevent anything from falling down inside the engine at this point. So go ahead and tuck these in there. Once we have those there, go ahead and grab that insulator pad, remove that, set that aside. Now before we remove our lower intake, we want to go ahead and clean up any other last minute debris that might be here, so when we lift this up, nothing falls down inside the engine. Use your vacuum, use the air hose, whatever you have, but You definitely want to clear this. I'm going to use our trim tool and pop up our fuel injector harness buttons here. Just little retainers. I'm going to pinch down a little tab on our ignition coils. Pop these off. Now the fuel injectors have red locking tabs on them. So what we want to do is lift up on those little red locking tabs. We're going to use a pick to get underneath the red lock tab and just gently pop these up. And then just beyond that red locking tab, there's going to be a little pinch clip. And pinch those and pop those off. Go ahead and swing that off to the side. We're going to go ahead and repeat this process for the passenger side. Using a 5/16 socket and extension, we're going to go ahead and loosen the 8 bolts on our lower intake. And we have a securing strap, and what we're going to do is just run this underneath. Now we're just going to hold this up out of the way so we can gain access to our oil cooler down below. Now before we remove any actual hardware, we're going to use some towels here, shove them down inside the intake ports here. We don't want to drop any hardware down there accidentally. Highly recommend you take this precaution. Once this is done, there are 5 E8 bolts here we want to loosen and remove. Now that we have these screws loose, we can go ahead and wiggle this, separating the O-rings from the motor, the seal going down. Actually, there's a couple different seals down there. There we go. Wiggle that up. And surprise, we got some garbage down in there. Now what we'll do is just kind of tip this off. Now that we have the oil cooler removed here, there are a couple O-rings here stuck into the valley on the ports. So you just want to kind of reach down here and peel these off. There is one of the O-ring seals there, and then the other one is right here. Peel it off, and we're going to set those aside for now. Now I'm going to use a towel and just clean up these ports. Now we have 2 knock sensors here. We have one right here and we have one further back. We want to disconnect the connectors. Now the process for the knock sensors are the same for either one. Now there is a clip right here on this connector. You're simply going to press it down. It almost feels spring-loaded. You're going to press that down and pull that connector off. With that pulled off to the side, we want to go ahead and remove that Torx bit in the center of that knock sensor. We're going to do that using a T40 Torx bit. Go ahead and break that free, and then we'll just spin that out. Go ahead and grab that bolt, remove that. We don't want to drop that down in those oil passages there. Then grab that knock sensor, lift it up and out. Go ahead and take a towel and wipe down the surface of where the knock sensor is to go. Make sure that's clean. Take your new knock sensor, lower that down. Now you want to be careful not to bang this, drop it, anything like that. They are super sensitive. Take the bolt, line that up, and we're going to get that started. I'm going to just snug that down by hand. Now we're going to torque the knock sensor to 15 foot-pounds. Under torquing or over torquing can cause the knock sensor to send a wrong signal or not send a signal at all. So you want to make sure that those are done properly. You want to go ahead and repeat this process for the rear knock sensor. Now when installing the connector, you're simply going to line it up, push it on, and it'll automatically clip on. And there you have it. Lower the oil cooler down, line that up. All right, now at this point we can go ahead and get the 5 bolts installed here. And we're just gonna start them, make sure we can get all the threads started. Now we're just going to gently snug these down, and then we're going to come back and torque these in a position. So basically you're basically just seating these. I'm going to torque this to 106 inch-pounds. And there's a particular pattern that we're doing this in. So the first one is right beside the oil filter. Number 2 is the opposite back corner here. Number 3 is this corner here. 4. And 5. Once we're done torquing, we can connect the connectors on the bottom side here. Push that on, you're gonna feel it and hear it click. Same thing with this one. And then push our red lock tab down into place. Here we go, it's now clipped into place. Let's go ahead and proceed to cleaning the lower intake ports on the engine here. Now we're just going to use some spray solvent here. And you want to go ahead and clean around the perimeter here. You want to make sure that the gasket has a nice clean area to seal to. Just continue this process for all of the ports. And once that surface looks nice and clean, and you're satisfied that you're going to have a good seal with those O-rings, next thing you want to do is pay attention to the bottom side of the intake itself. I'm going to remove our securing strap and tuck that over there. You want to go ahead and pay attention to the bottom side here and inspect these seals. Now what you want to do is run your finger along here. If you can feel that seal sticking out further than the plastic itself, then you're probably good to go as far as reusing these here. And now if the gasket feels flattened out to the same surface as the plastic, so if you don't feel that rubber sticking out further, you want to go ahead and replace these, otherwise you can end up with an intake leak. Now ours are in good reusable condition, so before we drop it down, don't forget to remove your towels here. Give those ports a last little dusting here, clean off any debris, and then we can go ahead and lower our intake down in a position. And we'll start to get these bolts started all the way around the perimeter. Now that we have all of the lower intake bolts started, we're just going to gently snug them down. We just want to seat them. Okay, now that we have all of these seated, we can now proceed to the torquing of the bolts. Now we're going to go ahead and torque down our bolts. These here have to get torqued to 106 inch-pounds, and there's a particular pattern that this needs to be done in. Now after we've torqued this down once, we're going to go back through just to double check our torque spec on everything, make sure everything is seated properly. And you can see after we torqued it, we're coming through and it is torquing down a little bit further. I'm going to install our harness here for our fuel injectors as well as the ignition coils. Now installing a harness, you want to make sure that the red lock tabs are in a full up position, otherwise the connector won't pop on. You're going to feel it snap in, press that red lock tab down, do the same for the others. And then we have our ignition coils, super simple, just line them up, push them on, you're going to feel them click into place. I'm going to repeat for the passenger side. Once these are in, you can install your little plastic button retainers here and the valve covers. Before we install our upper intake, we want to go ahead and install our insulator here. Now we're going to remove our paper towels from here. And we already went ahead and made sure that the bottom of our intake was clean. So go ahead and line this up. We have two studs on the driver's side of this intake that need to go into brackets. Now with those lined up, we should be able to bring our intake over. We're going to just kind of double check, make sure there's nothing caught in the way. Next step is to go ahead and start to get our bolts caught. So we're going to go around Now that we have our bolts started on the intake and everything is lined up, you can give that intake just a wiggle and you can feel that it's seated and it's not loose or wobbly. Once you don't have any wobble to it, we can now go ahead. I'm just going to gently snug. We're not tightening these in because there is a torque procedure for these here and a torque pressure. So just get them pretty much seated, that's it. Now this back one here, we did have to source a new bolt for this one here. Now that we have all of our bolts installed on the upper intake, let's go ahead and torque them down. Now I'm going to go ahead and torque down our bolts here. There is a particular pattern. You can go ahead and follow along on the screen here. And we're going to torque this to 89 inch-pounds, starting with the rearward bolt in the back here. No, we went ahead and torqued everything down. If you want to, you can go ahead and do that same procedure a second time just to make sure everything is torqued properly. At this point here, we'll go ahead and start to install the rest of our components and connectors. Now on the upper intake, we have these two brackets, and we're going to install the nuts on these here. Get that one installed. Get one on the rear bracket. Using our 10 millimeter, we can go ahead and tighten that down. Just want to snug those down. I'm going to bring our vacuum hoses over. Drop those down. Secure your differential vent tube right there. I want to install this bracket on the back side here. I'm going to bring this up and get that lined up. Now there's two studs, one on the back here, one closer forward right behind the throttle body, and then we have the stud here to install down below. And once you get that stud started, we're going to try and thread it in as far as you can by hand. And just kind of reach back there, and we want to snug that down. I'm going to install the two 10 millimeter nuts. It's going to be one here. It's going to be one that goes on the back side here. Just gently snug that down. I'm going to do the same for the back. Now I want to go ahead and pay attention to this vacuum hose right here. This vacuum hose attaches to the back side of the intake. So we're just going to slide this in. And once it's in position, we'll just go ahead and grab the clamp for it. I'm going to slide that up. Grab your pliers. With that in place, we can go ahead and grab our hose here. I'm going to snap that on here. I have this hose here to pop onto the back side. We have a little retainer button right here that needs to go into the bracket. Line that up and push that on. Bring your harness out and about. We have this harness here to press on. Get your connector lined up onto the throttle body. Press it on. And we have our map sensor here. I'm going to line that up, twist it, and swing it around. Then we can install our connector onto that. Press it on, you can feel it and hear it click into place. I want to go ahead and set our back cowl cover back into place. Make sure you watch for the wiper motor harness as we slide this back. Okay, to remove our retainer here. Line this up. Pop this on. Just snug it down gently. We're going to repeat for the driver's side. We're going to install the lower securing nut on this back stud. We're going to install our bolt right down here. Get that started. I'm going to go ahead and snug this down. I'll go ahead and tighten down this bolt. Let's go ahead and repeat for the other side. All right, we have that bolt started there. snug that down. Let's go ahead and get that one snugged down. I'm going to go ahead and bring our wiper transmission over. Now what we want to do is take the rubber grommet here and slide this into the cover or the tray. Popped it into place. So we have the rubber grommet into the bracket down here. I want to go ahead and get this bolt started on the driver's side. So you have the long bolts that go on the top of this bracket. Get those started, and we have the two lower bolts that go into the lower pan. Go ahead and install the other wiper transmission bolt here into the bracket. Well, let's go ahead and tighten everything down. Tighten these down here. And slide our cowl cover up and in. And let's get this side lined up. Go ahead and line up the passenger side. Now we can press in our clips here into the fender. I'll repeat this process for the driver's side. We're going to line up our wiper blade with our mark on the windshield and then simply press this down. I'm going to install the nut. Now we're going to snug that down, leave this open. Let's go ahead and repeat for the other side. Go ahead and torque this down to 16 foot-pounds. Do the same for this one here. Once that's torqued, pull that cover over, snap it down. Install your cowl seal here. It's a little plastic button. Pop that in, and it works that into the raised ridge there. Pop that in, work our way around to the passenger side. Line up your intake here. Work that onto the throttle body. The air box here, or the air intake tube, has a rubber grommet that this should be popping into. So I'll pop it onto the air filter box. Feel underneath for that grommet, and it'll pop into place. Using a flathead screwdriver, we can go ahead and tighten down the clamps here. Just gently snug that down. All right, snug that down. And we have this connector here for their air intake temp sensor. Line that up, press that on. You're going to feel it and hear it click into place. Reconnect the ground terminal, slide that down into place. And let's go ahead and tighten down the terminal nut here. Make sure that's good and snug. Give that terminal a little wiggle, make sure that is locked on pretty good. So now go ahead and install the lid. Now on the bottom of the lid here, you're going to have 4 of these little tabs here. I want to go ahead and line those up. Snap those down, and you're all set. Now we install the engine cover here. There's going to be some rubber grommets around. You want to line these up with the plastic posts sticking up. Go ahead and press that down, pop it on, and you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.